Hello. We're back on our weekly chat about what's been happening in the Dáil and politics in Dublin Southwest in the course of the week, and taking questions and answers. We're on TikTok and Instagram today, so if you're interested, please share it, invite your friends, etc., etc., and ask any questions, and I'll do my very best to answer questions as they come in. As every week, there's a lot been happening. Today, one thing to mention is today and yesterday, really something that I think to any reasonable-minded person looks absolutely incredible, which is that there's a court case ongoing in the European Court of Justice whereby the Irish state, the government, is spending millions of euros of public money to fight a court case to say that the Irish state, the public, shouldn't get over 13 billion euros worth of taxes that the European Commission say is owed to the Irish state. That could build 70,000 homes, it could build new hospitals, it could provide beds, it could provide for a rapid and just transition to a zero carbon economy. But instead, the position of the Irish state is we want that money to stay on Apple's unbelievable cash balances. They're sitting on $200 billion effectively of cash. They say it should stay there as opposed to being used for ordinary people. I just don't feel there is any greater illustration of the fact that this government, in the words of James Connolly, it's a committee for the rich. It isn't a government that serves the interests of ordinary people. It is serving the interests of the big multinational corporations and the big Irish corporations, and not the interests of ordinary people. They have no interest in taking this money and using it to resolve all of the problems that ordinary people face. Something else is the fact that tomorrow is the 5th anniversary of the tremendous victory of the repeal vote, where we got rid of the 8th Amendment from the Constitution, and then we won abortion rights. It was a movement from below that won that. I mean, originally all the establishment parties, Varadkar, Martin, etc., they were all against it. But it took protests, organisation from below, and then a huge canvassing effort by loads of people involved in Together for Yes and other campaigns right across the country to win a very, very substantial victory. Since then, unfortunately, we have the evidence that still something like 700 women have still been forced to travel to access abortions because of the restrictive nature of the laws they put in there to appease conservative politicians like Simon Coveney, for example. The 3-day waiting period went in because Coveney wanted a 3-day waiting period, not because of any medical evidence, not because of the needs of women, but instead because Coveney wanted it, that was necessary for his journey. But the consequence is that even though we repealed the 8th Amendment, even though we passed some abortion legislation, you still have criminalisation of abortion in this country, which has a chilling effect on doctors. You still don't have provision of abortion services right across the country. You still have women forced to travel, in particular, actually, in circumstances of fetal abnormalities, being forced to travel to Britain and elsewhere. So we have a bill tomorrow in the Dáil to mark the 5th anniversary of repeal to right those wrongs. A pro-choice bill, a bill to get rid of the 3-day waiting period. I can go into a doctor next week, whenever I get an appointment, and have a vasectomy, and the doctor doesn't say to me, legally, sorry, you have to come back in 3 days' time. That is, a paternalistic approach which is applied to women and their reproductive health, and not to men. So we need to get rid of that. We need full decriminalisation of abortion to get rid of that chilling effect, and we need to provide abortion for those who need it, for those who need to access it in this state, and stop forcing people to travel abroad. We've heard that the government is going to kick it off. They're going to effectively put an amendment in to say nothing happens with our bill for a year. It's very cynical. It's like the kind of waiting period that they impose on those trying to access abortions. It's an attempt and it's an illustration of how the government will try to kick this beyond the next election and continue to force women to travel in order to access abortions. So we have a rally tomorrow at the Dáil at 6 o'clock. So we encourage people to come along outside the Dáil to join the protest then. The other thing I'd say, come here, we'll get to all these questions, more questions on TikTok, is the whole issue of neutrality. I mean, I think this is going to be a topic we're talking about almost every week, because week after week they kind of try to chip away at what is left of neutrality. Women can have a vasectomy without wait periods, so stop trying to compare vasectomy to abortion, someone says. But this is about reproductive health. This is about vital health care for women. Like, why on earth should you have to wait 3 days and come back and see if you change your mind? There's no medical reason to do that. It's about saying that we don't trust women to make these decisions, when in actuality, if you look at what drove people to vote for repeal, 62% of people in an exit poll said that the women's right to choose was the key factor for what they were, for why they voted that way. But back to the question about neutrality, they're just chipping away. So the latest is now they have all three parties lined up in the government to support getting rid of the triple lock. So the triple lock is the idea, which is that in order to send Irish troops abroad, three things are necessary: decision of the government, vote of the Dáil, and a decision of the UN, in most cases the UN Security Council. Now they've got Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, and the most recent one is the Green Party, to say that we want rid of the triple lock. So that's completely against everything the Green Party is meant to stand for. It's against what the Green Party was saying just a month and a half ago, what Eamon Ryan was saying. It's against what's in the programme for government. But of course, once again, the Green Party has wrestled with its conscience and the Green Party has won. But the point I made to Varadkar today in the Dáil is that this isn't a new development. Fine Gael has wanted rid of the triple lock for 20 years. So they like to say, which is madness, we're allowing Putin, we're allowing China to dictate our policy, saying when we can send troops abroad because they can veto a decision at the UN Security Council. They want to present it as a response to Putin's horrendous invasion of Ukraine. But you can go back to 2003, if you Google Beyond Neutrality, Fine Gael, you'll find a policy document from 20 years ago where they describe the triple lock as a political straitjacket that they want to get rid of. You can search Leo Varadkar in the Dáil in 2008, given out about the triple lock. So the point is, these had a pre-existing agenda, which is to get rid of neutrality, to align Ireland with NATO, and they're using Putin's invasion of Ukraine in order to drive that agenda. That's 100% what is happening here. And you have to remember that if they didn't have a triple lock at the time of the US invasion of Iraq, there was nothing else to stop them saying, we're going to send soldiers, we're going to send ordinary, working class, young people to fight for a war for oil and profit for US interests against ordinary Iraqi people. They agreed to being used, for example. So that's what they would have been able to do, because it's still a double lock. But sure, the double lock is just the and the Dáil, and the government by definition has a majority in the Dáil, so that's no decision whatsoever. Who's pushing our alignment with NATO? Fine Gael, Fianna Fáil, and the Green Party are going along with it. They won't come on and say directly we want to join NATO, and that's kind of. But very, very clearly, that's the direction of travel. Get rid of the triple lock is the immediate thing. They're having these bogus consultative forums across the country with existing agenda, and they're trying to drive that through. Just there's a comment come in there from Lou saying, I'm from Tala, I'm so sorry to what happened to you last week. Thanks a lot, Lou, I appreciate that. We're not all like that, don't worry. I'm from Tala. Well, I live in Tala, and I'm not like that. But thanks a lot. I've been kind of flooded by messages of people sending solidarity and support. Some people might have seen it was a pretty horrendous threat that someone said to me we were outside the square doing campaigning about the pro-choice bill actually, and someone they said they'd slit my wife's throat before the end of the week, which is obviously not nice for me or for her. But obviously the vast majority of people we meet aren't like that. Unfortunately, there has been a definite incidence over the past week and a half, and there's definitely a group of people who are targeting and attempting to disrupt People Before Profit's activity in Dublin South West. We had a meeting on the Monday night in Jobstown, which was disrupted. A whole bunch of activists linked to the far right came to disrupt the meeting. We had to cancel the meeting. That was a meeting about organising against evictions. Unfortunately, most of those those far right people, they actually are opposed to the eviction ban. They support evictions. They tell lies about our right to housing bill because they think that landlords should have the right to do whatever they want with their property out, if that's what they wanted to do. And then on Friday night, we were campaigning for a playground in Kiltalong Park in Jobstown. You might have seen the video. We shared it. We shared her video because we think it displays her in a very good light, where she was just really like harassing me, originally asking questions. Oh yeah, I can ask a question. Who's the far right? I'll answer that in a second. Saying all sorts of crazy stuff. Not accepting any of the answers, repeatedly saying quite disgusting things, saying that I want to teach children how to masturbate. I was just like, no, I don't. And I said it over and over again. She said, oh, you said it on TV. And if she's watching or if someone else believes it's true, go and find a clip from TV. I obviously didn't say that because I obviously don't want that. That's complete nonsense. And if people are saying that kind of stuff to you, you should ask them like what their sources are, and why are people peddling these sort of lies. And then the final incident I'll mention, and then I'll come to that question. I support the books. I do support books. I don't know what books you're talking about. Is literally yesterday, Kay Keane, who was one of the people at the meeting, she's from Jobstown, she's an activist in Jobstown, a community activist for a long time. She was at the meeting, for example, that was disrupted. She said to them, look, we're here to talk about the playground, we're here to talk about evictions, and they literally said, we have no interest here. But that was what the meeting was about. It was for the community to come together. But then yesterday, she was on the way to the shops and someone came up to her and gave her fierce abuse. In her local shop, like that's 5 minutes walk less from where she lives. And that's just completely unacceptable. You know, she's not even an elected public representative. She's a community activist. I'm sure she has done far more for her community than any of these people who are having a go, abusing her or People Before Profit activists. And I would pose a question like, what is their agenda? Why are they going after People Before Profit? Why are they going after Sinn Féin? Why are they going after the opposition? Why aren't they going after the government? Someone asked the question about who is the far right. First thing I'd say is like, you know, obviously the majority of people, the vast majority of people, even who have concerns about refugees coming in or whatever, aren't far right. I'm not saying all those people are far right. I don't think they're far right. The vast majority are not. If you're quoting Hitler approvingly on Telegram, I think you're far right. I don't think you can say people like that aren't far right. And Justin Barrett, the head of the National Party, that's what he did. If you worked for Nigel Farage, if you describe people getting payments for institutional, as a result of institutional abuse, as an ATM scam, if you were previously the acting editor of the Irish Catholic, I think you're certainly on the radical right. That's Herman Kelly, the head of the UK Independence Party. If you were kicked out of Justin Barrett's party, the National Party, because of what you said at Aisling Murphy's grave, right? So you were in a far right party and you're kicked out because they say what you did is too bad. Then I think you're far right. That's the head of Ireland First, and who works with Derek Bly and others. So they're three far right organisations in Ireland. Vast majority of people aren't in those, aren't connected to those, etc. Of course. But I'm just saying these people do exist. And it's funny because they portray themselves exactly. Here's someone here. You're blaming landlords for the housing crisis to deflect from your open border multicultural project. Exactly. So I think that is a far right argument, right? And it illustrates how the far right are an enemy of ordinary people building a movement to fight the housing crisis. These people want you to believe, just like Fine Gael want you to believe, there was no housing crisis until the war in Ukraine, until the refugees. But that's not true. There was a housing crisis before then. The housing crisis does not come from Ukrainians or Syrians or whatever. It comes from the fact that we have a government that has served the interests of private landlords, has consciously allowed rents to rise to extraordinary levels for the profit of the corporate landlords. It's consciously pursued policies to get house prices to rise. Literally, The Construction Industry Federation called for policies to keep housing prices high, and the government did them. So that's why we have a housing crisis. And if all the asylum seekers and refugees were able to go home tomorrow, we'd still have a housing crisis, because these people aren't in homes. These people are in overcrowded accommodation. Something like 800 people in City West, made for 350 people, with 16 showers between them. Horrendous situation. 500 of them, because of the government decision, are on the streets in tents. I'd make the point, if you're burning tents of refugees, then you're probably far right or influenced by the far right. Fine Gael are centre right, I'd say, in kind of traditional terms. Someone asked, are they far right or centrist? They obviously have their origins as a far right party. Blue shirts. Owen O'Duffy went off to fight with Franco against socialists, against Republicans in Spain. And I would say that, like, you really have to ask why they're attacking the opposition, why they're trying to divide people. And I think they serve the interests of the big corporate landlords, the private developers, those who are profiting from the housing crisis, by distracting from the real causes of the housing crisis, and by dividing people and preventing people from uniting, like we did together on the water charges, like we need to do on the housing crisis, and to say, you know, it's not about single mothers, it's not about travellers, it's not about Ukrainians, it's about the big corporate landlords, the private developers. It's not about other vulnerable people, it's about the people in the top that we need to unite. Just trying to answer a few other questions here. How do I feel about the new hate speech laws? I mean, I was pretty much the only TD in the Dáil, speaking on behalf of People for Profit, the only TD to debate the hate speech laws and to argue against the hate speech laws, because I think they go too far. I think it is appropriate, like the basic idea that if you commit an assault and it's aggravated by hatred, you're doing it because of racism against this person's race, or, you know, sexism because of their sex or whatever. I think that's, like, it's appropriate that it would be aggravated. But I think it is quite bad, it's quite dangerous what the government has done with the hate speech laws, because, well, a few different things. There's a thing called the demonstration test they've introduced, which is the only place in Europe that they've done it, and the right, for example, a potential situation which I highlighted in the Dáil, you might have seen the video, whereby someone can be criminalised for hateful ideas that are on their computer, for example. They've written down themselves or downloaded, but they haven't published. They haven't had a hateful impact on people. So I think that's wrong. It's a mistake to go down that way. Why did the government wait till refugees came to Ireland to build temporary homes? I think that's a fair question. I think it's a scandal that the government didn't do everything it should do to deal with the housing crisis. Clearly, like, we have 50,000 homes that have been vacant in Ireland for 6 years or more. They're just sitting there. 140,000 vacant homes in total. You have 80,000 planning permissions sitting there, like, unused. It's a scandal that the government hasn't done those things. That isn't the fault of the refugees coming in here. That's the fault of the government. And if we unite together to say now's the moment to resolve the housing crisis, to build homes for all, well, we can absolutely do that. But if we are divided amongst ourselves, well, then that clearly would be extremely bad. Why are all the men coming in, leaving women and children behind? So 35% of refugees that came into the country last year were women. 25% were children, and then the rest were men, obviously. It can be the case, and it was the case in Ireland before, that it can be easier for men to get out of horrendous war-torn situations, persecution, etc., and then with the intention of their families coming later. So that can happen. People see a situation where it's all men in particular areas because that's the government policy, is just to put all men in particular areas, that they put families in some places and all men in particular areas. But then what is put out there is it's only men, etc. But it's not only men. And let's be clear that there's protests against situations where Ukrainian families, women and children, etc. as well. I spoke about the hate speech bill just a minute ago there. Sorry. So if you go back on it, you'll see what I said on that. Let me go back through. Will we go into government with Sinn Féin. I answered that last week, right? So I don't go through the same ones. Why can't you answer the questions when you're posted in person? I did. That's like, you should go and watch this video which we posted. You can see it certainly on Facebook. I think probably on Instagram as well. And we posted the video that the woman put up, and like, I answer her questions. She doesn't like the answers because she wants to lie about what I say. Yeah. Will I do any funny TikToks like Simon Harris? I don't think Simon Harris' TikToks are funny, so I don't know. I ran from my meeting. No, people turned up at the meeting who have previously threatened to physically assault me. Right? In a meeting in a community centre, there's a karate class going on across the road. We don't want that to happen in our community. We don't want to bring that onto the community. So, yeah, cancel the meeting. We will be having other meetings, don't worry. We'll have big opportunities. To discuss these things. Why are DCC so slow about putting boarded up houses back in the market? Absolutely. Basically because they don't have the staff. They don't have the resources. It's madness. It's like same in South Dublin County Council. It's absolutely madness that like you just have boarded up houses across the place. It's infuriating for people when you see them. Doesn't make any sense. We should have the resources. Like, obviously, from every point of view, it makes sense to do that. Why push the gender ideology on children? See, that was a question the woman asked me, and I was like, what do you mean by that? Like, I was against gender ideology before people started using the word gender ideology, as in the idea that, like, boys have to do this, girls have to do that. That's gender ideology in my view. So I don't think we should be pushing people into these, like, rigid gender roles. What came out that she was actually asking about was about sex education. And, like, I'm for sex education. Sex education protects children from abuse. If you don't educate children about these things, then you're leaving them wide open to abuse. And you have to ask the question, why are some people campaigning against sex education and telling lies about sex education to try and scare people that they want to teach your kids to masturbate? That stuff is not true, right? Sex education is about protecting children from abuse. Are all you TDs willing to take a pay cut for every immigrant you just bring in? Well, forget about the comment about every immigrant I bring in. Like, I only take the average worker's wage. The rest is all donated to campaigns. We think that all TDs should be on that. Can't understand why Irish people are upset about what's going on at the moment. I can. I think, like, there's a huge degree of alienation. People are pissed off. That's completely understandable. You look around, the housing crisis has been going on forever. It looks like, how is it ever going to change? Cost of living crisis. People's bills are going through the roof. An extra grand on groceries, an extra grand on fuel, an extra grand on energy. And then I think it can be easier for people to say, oh, this is the problem. These vulnerable people who are next door to me. It's easier to think they're the problem as opposed to those at the top who aren't maybe visible to us in the same way. Your Dennis O'Briens, your Apples, your Google, the very big rich corporations who are responsible for the problems that we face. So I do understand it. But I think it's the job of socialists to say, we got to unite. We got to deal with the reality here that they're trying to divide you. The far right are the tool for them to try and divide ordinary people. We reject that and get people together. And instead, you know, if we come together, we can really achieve a lot. You know, that's how we beat the water charges. It's how we can. A socialist on TikTok. I am a socialist on TikTok. Why does all your party do is complain? Socialists are the far left. Yeah, I don't have, like, unlike the far right that are all like, no, you can't call us far right. I don't have a problem with people calling us far left. We stand for the end of this capitalist system. It's a rotten system which is destroying our planet, destroying people's lives. It's based on the exploitation of workers. I answered the question about the far right there earlier. So we'll go back and look through that. I'm not trying to take your right to protest away at all. The Austrian rental model, I don't know loads about it, but clearly they have much more rent control and like public involvement in the rental sector than we have here. It's clearly a much, much better situation than here. Why does all your party do is complain? I might finish on this one. It's obviously not true. One, there is a lot to complain about. You're probably on here complaining yourself. And like, you're right to be doing, right? There is a lot to complain about. But like, we also put forward alternatives all the time. We put forward a bill last week to stop ban private jets from Ireland, which would have an impact in terms of our carbon emissions, would stop. And it would only impact the very, very, very richest people in our society, wouldn't impact ordinary people. Like I said, we have a bill tomorrow to have pro-choice legislation to give to implement with a will of people expressed 5 years ago in terms of repeal. We, like every single week, we're bringing forward positive proposals. Would I call you far right as you're a concerned citizen? No. If you're just a concerned citizen, I wouldn't. If you're quoting Hitler on Telegram, then I probably would. But just don't quote Hitler on Telegram and you'll be all right. All right. I think I got most of those right. I'll be back, so don't worry if I didn't get your question today. And I will be coming back next week and answer more questions. So thanks a lot, everybody, for joining. Take care.